Welcome to this special edition of 12 News, where we're honoring those who serve. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Tram Mai.
And I'm Justin Pizzera. Right now, there are nearly 460,000 veterans living right here in Arizona, meaning for every 1,000 adults in the state, about 62 are vets.
The U.S. Census Bureau classifies veterans as people who previously served in the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, or Coast Guard, or who served in the U.S. Merchant Marine during World War II. Clearly, veterans are a large and very important part of our communities, including our brave reservists who call Arizona home.
And while they're fighting overseas, it's their families back here that many say are the reason for their service. 12 News journalist Rachel Cole was able to capture a recent homecoming for some very happy Arizona families.
6-year-old Renee is on a mission.
And coloring a heart.
Creating welcome signs for her dad.
She made a big sign for him with all her artwork that she's been doing.
Her father, Tech Sergeant Randall Wires, along with 100 members of the 161st Air Refueling Wing with the Arizona Air National Guard, returning home from a 90-day deployment in the Middle East.
I'm gonna hug him.
The refueling wing are the giant tankers that refuel fighter jets in midair.
But the tempo that they took on when they were over there was significant. We fly quite a bit here stateside. I would say if we were to double or triple that, that's probably what they were seeing over there.
Now they're home, welcomed by signs, flowers, balloons, and waves.
Took them out of school early, signed out of work early, and came down.
While they've completed their mission, their families also share in that sacrifice for our country.
It's hard on both parties, definitely, especially with little kids, trying to explain time and why he's there and what he's doing there.
I have a lot of family support. I've got 2 sisters that live in the valley, and my mother-in-law also lives with us, and so I'm constantly asking for favors from them.
It all comes down to moments like this. Renee got to finally give her dad that big hug.
Feels really good. Good to see my family again.
Working hard for their nation, oftentimes it's the thought of their family that keeps them going.
Makes it all worth it. Otherwise, I'm not sure what I'd be fighting for.
Just super excited. I haven't seen my little girl in 3 months, my boys, my other daughter Capri, and obviously my wife. I'm just excited and anxious to get home and hang out with them.
So emotional. We love that. Over the years, we featured many veterans taking part in special flights at Falcon Field in Mesa, thanks to the nonprofit Grounded No More. They just completed another season, but this time they're moving on without their vintage World War II era plane, which has meant so much for so many. Our Caribe Divine has a story.
Grounded No More has been honoring veterans for nearly a decade.
Thanks for your service.
Well, thank you all for being here.
Sergeant Big Bob Richmond.
Each veteran given a free ride in the friendly skies aboard Amazing Grace.
All right, let's get you flying.
Well, Amazing Grace is a 1943 Fairchild PT-26.
She was originally used to train British pilots in Canada during World War II. For some veterans, it's more than a vintage plane.
I flew in one of these planes just 80 years ago.
Overwhelming, to say the least.
How old do you feel?
39.
While it's a trip down memory lane for some, for others, flying with Amazing Grace was more than a joyride.
It was peaceful. You could kind of let go of some things. When I went up in Amazing Grace, it seemed like for that time period, I didn't have to think about it. It wasn't in my thoughts.
Guys that wouldn't talk about anything. We had one lady called us up 2 years ago, and she says, I've found more stuff out about my husband in the last year than I have in 38 years we've been married. That whatever you guys did, it just opened him up.
I feel like I'd like to do it more often.
Unfortunately, 680 veteran flights later, Amazing Grace has been retired.
They had a metal shortage in World War II, so they made this airplane primarily out of wood, which unfortunately is why we've had to retire it. It had a couple of separations in the wood, and the cost to get it repaired is probably twice what the airplane is worth.
Owner and pilot Tony Anger says the nonprofit Grounded No More will still go on the honor flights, just with another vintage plane. Like the veterans she served, Amazing Grace will never be forgotten.
And bring back those memories, I think.
I just want to say God bless you for your courage, your sacrifice, and your service.
Really incredible. Amazing Grace will be going to the Commemorative Air Force, where volunteers will restore her.
Military members serve in so many capacities for our country, including working in the kitchen. We met a Gilbert veteran who served on the front lines as a cook. Rachel Cole has her incredible story.
There's only so many times you can have MREs in the field, and once you get a hot meal, it would change the whole morale of a soldier. They definitely look forward to getting those nice meals.
Inspired by the tragedy of 9/11, Veronica Morgan enlisted in the United States Army.
As a woman, I didn't think that there was too many jobs available for females, but I quickly learned that there was a lot of jobs that I was able to do, and I decided to become a cook.
Veronica's Army service started in Hawaii, and a few months later, she was thrown into Hell's Kitchen, literally. Her unit was deployed near the front lines in Afghanistan. No easy task.
We had about 400 people on our base and 4 cooks, so we were working very long hours, 12 hours a day sometimes. We had to ration our food out and make sure it was smaller portions, which obviously when guys would come back from, a long time out in the field, they would be really hungry and upset because they couldn't get more food. We would get rocket attacks maybe 5 to 10 times a day.
She served in the Army for 3 years and then went on to culinary school, where she worked in a less hostile environment. Now she's serving in another capacity.
I'm a volunteer at the Home of Record Project. We help veterans with transitional housing, financial stability grants, and social services.
A chance for Veronica to make a difference for her fellow veterans.
We've taken veterans from living in their car to getting their own house within a 6-month period of time.
Veronica's time in the Army has taken her a long way.
At age 19 years old, I don't think I realized what I was getting myself into, I'm grateful that I came back, and I'm grateful that I got to experience that, because it really made me appreciate the country that we live in.
And Veronica says the Army food was often bland because they had to avoid allergy-causing ingredients, but she says it was still better than hospital food.
I bet. Well, now to the tireless efforts of one loving sister. She helped completely transform a safe haven for Arizona veterans. Here's a look at the casita, where those struggling can get back on their feet.
1, 2, 3.
The new casita, named in honor of Gunnery Sergeant Stephen Fishley.
I love you all.
Joan Roughton's brother.
I wanted to make this a memory place for him.
Stephen was a 30-year U.S. Marine veteran. He suffered from PTSD and lived in the old casita for a time.
My brother felt that this was a home for him. Even though he had a family, he had another family.
The casita sits next to the VFW Post 720. It was a place where struggling veterans could stay until they got back on their feet.
There's a lot of us that come back home and we're lost from active duty service.
Daniel Davalos, a combat veteran, spent 2 months living in the casita, and it was the help he needed.
It's important to a lot of us. Sorry.
It was the mentorship from the veterans in the VFW post that helped him get back on his feet.
I've done everything they can to keep me on the right track. Still to this day, they still give me guidance.
The old building can house 3 to 4 veterans at a time, but it needed a major makeover.
It was basically a wreck.
Poor plumbing, no AC, broken furniture, years of patchwork fixes had reached its end. So Joan rallied the troops.
It just looked like a dungeon to me, and that's not what veterans should be in.
After 4 years of raising enough money, they rolled up their sleeves and got to work. Now it looks like home with central air, new furniture, fresh paint, and a patriotic mural.
It's beautiful. It really shows that there are people in the community that truly do care about us.
Just a few months ago, this casita had no name, and now it has a soul.
It's very important to me, and it's very true to my heart that this got finished.
Just beautiful inside and out. If you are a veteran who is struggling, or you know someone who is you're not alone. Help is available, and you can speak to a qualified VA responder by calling 988 and pressing 1, or you can text 838-255. You don't have to be enrolled in VA benefits or health care to connect. Well, Memorial Day and Veterans Day are both dedicated to honoring U.S. military personnel, but who exactly is being honored differs. Memorial Day is always the last Monday of May and is a day to remember those who gave their lives for our country, specifically those who died in active duty or due to an injury sustained while serving.
Meanwhile, Veterans Day is celebrated on November 11th and honors every member of the military for their service. Veterans Day is to appreciate all veterans alive or those who are no longer with us anymore, but is largely intended to thank living veterans for their service.
Still ahead, it's been 50 years since the fall of Saigon. We're hearing from one veteran who helped dozens of refugees escape in the last hours of the war.
Plus, we're introducing you to some of the first African Americans to enlist in the U.S. Marine Corps, how they are being honored for the barriers they broke down during World War II.
Valor, dedication, sacrifice. Members of our military make a positive impact on our communities long after they take off the uniform. That's why Simplify Heating and Cooling is proud to join 12 News in honoring those who serve. We're seeking nominations for those who inspire, who give, and who protect. Share their story and help us shine a light on their selfless service. Nominate your hero today at 12news.com/those who serve. Let's celebrate the brave men and women who give so much for our freedom.
It's been more than 50 years since the end of the Vietnam War.
The Vietnam War lasted roughly 20 years, pitting the communist government of North Vietnam against South Vietnam and its biggest ally, the United States.
More than 58,000 U.S. service members died, and for the veterans and Vietnamese refugees who barely made it out alive during the final days, the anniversary of the end of the war is a painful reminder of the country they lost.
I spoke with Vietnam veteran Ted Murray, who helped thousands of people escape during the final days of the war, first by plane and then by helicopter.
Putting anywhere from 50 to 60 people on CH-53s that normally only carry 20, 30, everybody drop your luggage and get on the helicopter. And we put 50 on, 50 or 60, and then the next, it would take off, and then another one would come in. As they were waiting for the helicopter, they had to fill out 2 pieces of paper, their names, ages, and stuff like that, and we put them in 2 envelopes, one to go with the helicopter and one to stay in case the helicopter didn't make it out to the ships, so that we knew what helicopter and who was on that helicopter in case it went down, shot down or whatever. And that went on, 8, 9, 10 hours until it got too dark to do anymore. And about midnight, we got on one of the last helicopters out of the DAO compound. And when we left, I was at the back of the helicopter. I looked out the back and I could see tanks and soldiers moving towards Tan Son Nhut. And I would say it was maybe half an hour after we left that they were there taking it over.
One of those families who barely escaped was mine. I was born in Saigon and just 1 year old when my family fled Vietnam during the final days of the war. My dad was a major in the Vietnamese Air Force. Had we stayed in Vietnam, the unimaginable would have happened. So my parents gathered everything they could fit in a suitcase and fled with my brother and I. We boarded a packed C-130 cargo plane, eventually landing at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. We stayed at a refugee camp for about a month where I took my first steps. A host family took us in Virginia, and shortly afterwards, we eventually settled in Southern California. Now, 50 years later, I don't know if I was one of those families who Murray helped on that fateful day, but the chance to connect with veterans like him is an honor. So thank you.
You're welcome.
we will always be so grateful and so appreciative of your sacrifice.
I did what I was asked to do and was grateful to do it, and I am so proud of what we did. It was a period of time when I had survivor guilt, but when I met people that we helped to get out, like you, it mitigates that pain. We did what we were sent to do, and we were glad to do it.
And people like me and the entire Vietnamese community are so incredibly grateful for veterans like Ted and all the Vietnam veterans who helped our families. According to the VA, more than 2.7 million men and women served during the Vietnam War.
Nearly 2 decades before the start of the war in Vietnam, the first African Americans enlisted in the Marine Corps during World War II. For decades, the Montford Point Marines' legacy as trailblazers in the military went unrecognized. Our Caribe Divine had the chance to speak with a Valley family whose father will finally get the recognition he deserves more than 80 years after enlisting.
It's a part of our history, and it should never be forgotten. You know, it's part of what got us to where we are now.
Kim Skelton is a former Marine and a member of the Montford Point Marines Association, a group dedicated to honoring an important piece of Black history. The Montford Point Marines were the first African Americans to enlist in the U.S. Marine Corps, breaking racial barriers during World War II.
Nobody wanted the Black Marines. So, you know, they had a lot of things that they had to go through, basically just to prove that they were worthy to be there.
Between 1942 and 1949, over 20,000 Black recruits trained at Montford Point Camp near Fort Lejeune in North Carolina. The camp was segregated, and while there, the Black Marines endured racism and subpar conditions.
And they made it harder. The training was actually harder for them because they were trying to make them fail. They expected them to fail, but they didn't.
African American Marines were initially banned from combat roles, but eventually, thousands of Montford Point Marines would serve bravely in some of our nation's bloodiest battles in Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and later Vietnam. Their contributions paving the way for President Truman's 1948 executive order ending segregation in the military. And in 2012, President Barack Obama posthumously awarded the Montford Point Marines with the Congressional Gold Medal, formalizing their legacy in America's history.
So posthumously, they're being awarded as the families are being found and contacted. So there's, you know, it's just kind of find them when you can.
Little did Kim know she would find one of those trailblazing men in a place she didn't expect.
We were having Thanksgiving dinner here.
Former NFL player Joe Jackson is Kim's cousin.
And somehow I got to talking about it, and I showed you his honorary discharge. And then that just lit a candle for her. She said, oh my goodness, the Montford Point Marines.
The pieces didn't come together for me until he pulled out the discharge certificate, and I could see everything written right there. And at that point, it was kind of like, I don't think you know what you've got here. You know, so it's history. You know, he was a trailblazer.
Joe's father, William Lee Jackson, served in the Peleliu Islands, east of the Philippines, from 1944 to 1945.
He was a role model. He was my hero. He encouraged me, and he believed in me. And I wanted to do the things to please him. But it was tough. I was not a perfect kid.
How much about him being in the Marines did you know?
Well, not very much. He didn't really talk about the war at all. My grandmother told me that my father never drank at all. He came back from the war, and he came back a different person.
After the Marines, Joe's father worked 26 years as a letter carrier for the U.S. Postal Service while putting his 5 kids through college. He died at age 57. 80 years after his service to our country, Joe's father will be awarded with a Congressional Gold Medal at a ceremony in June.
Our whole family is excited about it, and I just wish my dad could be around to receive it, obviously.
So what do you want people to know about your father's contribution?
I was thinking about that too. My dad didn't do anything extraordinary. He served his country. And the reason why we have this award is because of an injustice, not because my father was a valiant soldier and saved, a platoon, but it's because of something that should have happened that didn't happen.
As of today, only about 3,500 of the 20,000 Montford Point Marines have been identified and recognized with a Congressional Gold Medal. If you know a veteran who might be deserving of this award, you can contact the Montford Point Marine Association.
Still ahead, we're introducing you to two brothers who've dedicated their lives to serving our country side by side.
Valor, dedication, sacrifice. Members of our military make a positive impact on our communities long after they take off the uniform. That's why Simplify Heating and Cooling is proud to join 12 News in honoring those who serve. We're seeking nominations for those who inspire, who give, and who protect. Share their story and help us shine a light on their selfless service. Nominate your hero today at 12news.com/those who serve. Let's celebrate the brave men and women who give so much for our freedom.
Over the years, we've introduced you to family members who have served together in the military. Well, right now, we have the story of two brothers who've served together in the National Guard for 30 years.
As our Rachel Cole reports, they are two of Arizona's bravest who almost always get a second look.
These brothers have been serving with the National Guard for 30 years.
Frederick Adu, Derek Adu.
And yes, the Adu brothers are identical, which can be a little confusing for new recruits.
I said, I saw you, Sergeant Major, but you didn't say hi. I said, no, it wasn't me. It wasn't me, yeah. We it's many, all the time. And we get it all the time.
They were born in Chicago, but grew up in Ghana, a much different world than life in the U.S.
The life there is a struggle there than you have here. Yeah, you have the more benefit, the more, different path of life, right? Yeah, you can do whatever you choose in life.
They enlisted in the National Guard in Iowa. After returning to the States, they worked their way up the ranks and inspired the younger guardsmen along the way.
If I can get up here from where I came from, you can do it just because of the appreciation of how we are able to have that opportunity to be able to serve our country and be up in this rank.
The experience and the camaraderie the Army National Guard brings is what the Adu brothers appreciate most.
We are a community of family here that will help each other out. So that's one thing that God provides, Support. We nobody, we don't leave anyone behind. We're always here to support others. It's been a blessing to us.
Well, 12 News wants to honor the courage, dedication, and sacrifice of those in our armed forces. And we want to share the stories of the veterans who are closest to you.
So submit your Those Who Serve stories for a chance to be featured. Just go to 12news.com/those who serve.
From all of us here at 12 News, thank you so much for joining us for this Those Who Serve special.
And as always, we thank you, our military members, today and every day. We'll see you next time.